Can you retire with $700,000 at 60 years old, needing $65,000 a year of income? That's what we'll be looking at today as we dive into a couple's numbers and see how it can work for them. Welcome back to Simply Money. Today we are looking at a couple who has $700,000 of investments. They are 60 and 58 years old, and they are needing $65,000 a year of income to support the retirement that they would like. We're going to look at their expenses, what's discretionary spending, and what their actual need is, so we can break down the different scenarios that we might need to look at in case of these guardrails we'll have to set up to ensure that their retirement lasts, just in case there are some downturns or unexpected sequences within the market. And that's why you always want to be flexible in your retirement plan. We don't want to be so tight that we can never enjoy our retirement. That's part of the retirement goal, is to be able to enjoy our lives. But we know things happen. I'm not one to say, yeah, just work one more year. But there may be times when it is necessary to work another year or two to ensure that your retirement doesn't run out of funding. But we also need to look at that we don't cut our time short by continuing to work if there's things we want to do and we are able to do it. So let's dive into the numbers. Here on the Excel sheet that we use, we have a balance of $700,000. The annual income need is $65,000. Now we have this, and we'll look at the Monte Carlo in a minute to see how their portfolio is broken up. But based on what they have, their dividend yield will be at 2.67%, and we're putting in an average rate of return of 6%. And I know some people will say that's way too high, but these funds that they have averaged well over 11-12% per year on average, and this is something we need to look at. So here we're going with about an 8.5% return combined with the dividend, which is well below what they have been averaging over 10 years and lifetime of the funds. Now, again, we're going to be looking at the first person. In this case, it's the husband taking Social Security at 62. The amount will be $1,100 a month, and the spouse will be getting spousal support for $550 a month. I know that may seem low to a lot of people, but this couple was in a career field where they did not pay Social Security for many, many years, so there was a lot of zeros in there. And you can see when a lot of zeros are put in there, your top earnings are really pulled down because of those zeros. Their monthly benefit is much lower than it could have been. But this is the situation they're in, and yours may not be the same. You have to look at what your situation is. That's why this is always unique. And remember, this is for educational purposes, for entertainment. This is not financial advice. Anything I say here is for you to have an idea of what could be possible, but you have to do your own due diligence. The inflation rate we put in at 3% every year. Inflation will increase the total income that they need. And again, we don't always believe that's the case. Your spending is not a linear line going up straight, just like the stock market's not going to give you 8.5% year over year. It's going to be up and down. Your income that you need may be a little higher one year, maybe an expense on the house or a car comes in that is unexpected, or perhaps you start slowing down and you don't travel as much, or you don't do as much entertainment as you did for years earlier. There are different things that could increase or decrease the amount of income you need, but we have set it up at $65,000 the first year, increasing 3% each year after. As you can see, the first couple years in these scenarios, when people retire prior to Social Security, those are the more critical years because they're having to draw down their investments heavier than once things like a pension or Social Security kick in that provide extra income and reduce the amount that has to be drawn down. Starting balance is $700,000. There's no Social Security from either person. The dividends based on their portfolio would be just under $19,000 a year, meaning they'd have to draw down $46,000, which is a 6.6% withdrawal rate. This is a little bit high because you're also taking the dividends out, which are 2.6%, You're looking at a little over 9% drawdown on this. This is a little high, but again, it is only for a couple years. As you can see, that drawdown rate drops once Social Security kicks in. Once the second one kicks in, it drops down a little bit more, and it doesn't start going back up until many years down the road. So something to keep an eye on, especially if the sequence of returns in the market the first couple years are extremely low. Now, something to look at, this couple's income need is $65,000. What's been factored into that is what their tax burden would be based on their withdrawal strategy, their expenses, and their discretionary spending. Their expenses, what they need to live, paying their taxes, utilities, food, those necessities just to live, is $43,400. That's about $3,600 a month. That's a big drop from what their total income need is. And a lot of that is because they have factored in $1,500 a month for travel and $300 a month on their taxes. Again, this is based on this scenario where their funds are in Roth, HSA, so they get some tax-free withdrawals. They have the dividends. They're paying a lower tax, and their tax burden is very low considering they're getting $65,000 of income. Again, this is for them. This isn't a standard how it would be for everybody. In the worst case scenario, the market's really low. Maybe they forgo some of their traveling or all of their traveling for a year. $1,500 a month is $18,000 a year less that they would need and still be retired and taking care of their needs, their cars, their homes, and being able to get out and do stuff. Maybe they look at doing less expensive things, or they minimize their trips. They cut their trips in half and only use $9,000 a year. Again, $1,500 a month for travel is a pretty decent travel budget. You need to consider that and remember that this is the difference between what is needed and discretionary funds and how you can be flexible. Now let's look down the sheet here a little bit. You can see in this scenario that they are able to go until 93 and 91 of age. This lasts them well into retirement. At this withdrawal rate, they expect that this is how the market will work, that they're good to go until they're into their 90s. Again, they need to take in consideration their life expectancy, their family history, their own personal health, and will they need, when they're 90 years old, will they need $157,000 to maintain retirement? Probably not, but we don't know. We know cost of living is going to go up, and $157,000 when they're 90 is equivalent to $65,000 today. However, at 90, if they were 90 today, would they need $65,000 to live? Probably not. At 90, they're probably not going to be spending $18,000 a year traveling. These are just things we need to consider and look at when we're evaluating and preparing and making a plan for our retirement. One of the first things you need to do when you're trying to think, can I retire? We always ask, and this is a question that everybody seems to ask, is I have X number of dollars. I'm X years old. Can I retire? But they miss the first question that has to be asked. If somebody asks me, can I retire? And they give me those numbers, the first thing I'm going to ask them is, how much money do you need for your retirement? $700,000 for some people, they'd be like, oh my goodness, I could retire so well. Maybe they have a really high Social Security. Maybe they have a pension. Maybe their cost of living is extremely low. Maybe they don't plan on traveling. All sorts of factors come in where somebody else may be like, $700,000, there's no way I can retire. I still have a $2,800 a month mortgage. I have a $500 a month car payment. And I want to go travel and see my kids or go see these sites I've always wanted to see. And so they would no way be able to retire with $700,000. It all depends on you and your numbers. One of the first numbers you have to come up with is what is the income you will need. So sit down and look at things. And if you're younger, maybe you're 35, 40, you're not going to get an exact number, obviously, but start planning out. Try to get your cars paid off. Try to get your house paid off. And then factor in, what am I spending now? Then minus, I don't have a house payment. Don't forget, you still have insurance and taxes, but that is a fraction of the cost of rent or a mortgage. Don't worry about the cost of living adjustment. Do it in today's dollars. How much do I need in today's dollars if I was to retire, and start writing that out? How much do I need for food? How much do I need for utilities? How much are my taxes going to be on my house, my cars? How much do I need for home repair? How much do I need for clothing? All those things. Write everything down just like you would a normal budget on your month-to-month budget. You're just doing it in the scenario of retirement. Now, you may have big dreams if you're 30, that what you're going to do when you retire. And when you become 60, 65, 70, maybe those dreams have changed. You know what? When I was 30, I wasn't thinking about everything I want to do now. Now what I think about is I want to spend more time with my grandchild. I want to spend more time with my kids. Doesn't mean I don't want to travel. Doesn't mean I don't want to go do those things, because I want to spend more time doing things that aren't as extravagant as I thought I would when I was 30 years old. And maybe you do, and maybe at 60 you still will. That, again, is a personal decision. But get your numbers down. Figure out what your income needs will be. That is step number one in creating a retirement plan. Then you can plug in numbers of what you anticipate you'll have. Figuring out how much your Social Security will be. Go to the Social Security ssn.gov site and look at your numbers. See what it forecasts that you will get when you're 62 or 65 or 70, whatever the case might be. Go ahead and figure that out and put that in and see where you would stand. Now let's look at the Monte Carlo for this couple. We put the numbers in here already, $700,000. Now here, the withdrawal rate is $3,700. Two factors here. One is that is what they need to survive. That is their income needs, not their discretionary spending. But this is also after Social Security kicks in, how much they would need to draw down their portfolio. So $3,700, and you can look at that over here. Go back up to the chart. You have the $65,000. You minus the $14,000 for the Social Security from number one and $6,600 from number two. That leaves $3,700 a month that they need to draw down out of their portfolio. We're going to do this for a 30-year period, so that would put them at 90 and 88. Again, we could kick this up to 40 years if we want to. Remember, you're setting this up to look and see what is it projecting for 30 years. You're not going to start this and hit the go button and never make any adjustments for the rest of your life for the next 30 years until you die. That's not how it works. You're not going to say, oh, this is my retirement plan, go, and then you're stuck. Again, you may reduce spending one year. You may increase spending another year. The markets may do really good. We may have a decade of lost stocks where we don't see any gains. There are all sorts of factors that we have to consider and be prepared for and be flexible for. This is a guide, and this gives you a general idea based on historical data how you would fare in retirement with these numbers. We didn't do any sequence of return adjustment. We're just going off historical data. 10,000 scenarios. How would you fare? Now, here's the breakdown of this couple's portfolio. Again, I'm not recommending this. I'm not giving advice on whether this is a good or bad portfolio. I'm just showing you how it shows it would turn out based on their numbers and their allocations. They have SCHD at 60%. They have SCHG at 15%. They have SOXX at 5%. FXAIX at 10%. And the Vanguard Total Market at 10%. That is the 100% of their portfolio. And when you run this simulation, what we end up with, the Monte Carlo says that your survival rate is 95.7% of the time. That's good. That means that less than 5% of the time, this exact scenario would fail. But I like to say it means less than 5% of the time you would need to make some adjustments. If you had 10,000 people with this exact scenario, 9,500 of them, almost 9,600 of them, would survive for 30 years. They would not run out of money. The last 429 people would have to make adjustments. Doesn't mean they would fail, just means they may have to draw down a little bit less a couple years. That's it. Or maybe they pass away before they're 93 or 90 on this scenario, before they're 90, and it doesn't matter. Again, adjustments may need to be made. That's all the Monte Carlo shows. It doesn't mean they're definitely going to succeed. They're definitely going to fail. It means your success rate is very good, chances here, and you may need to make adjustments over here. As you can see, I love this chart. This is one of my favorite charts because it shows the percentiles of who would fall where. So if the market falls flat, like 50%, the median, it does what it has done half of the time. In 10 years, you can see where you'd be at $1.6 million. At 70 years old, they might adjust and say, hey, still got a little bit of pep in our step. We're going to travel some more. Our portfolio has done fantastic. We are going to increase. We're going to take some bigger trips, do some maybe more giving. Maybe we're going to give some of our kids some money. Whatever the case might be, they might do that now instead of waiting until they pass away because they've seen their portfolio skyrocket. Now, let's say 10% of the time, the market has done on the lower end, and this is what happened for their first 10 years, they'd be at $766,000. Again, this is adjusted for inflation, so that's spending-wise much less than the $700,000 they started with. So that's maybe in this scenario, they're like, okay, we're going to continue on the same trajectory. We're not going to change much because we're still doing fine, but we're not doing great. So we're not going to get crazy here. We're not going to increase our spending a ton, whatever the case might be. Let's say these first 10 years, the market did better than it's done 90% of the time, and you hit that 90th percentile. And look at that, you're at almost $3 million. Now, that's everyone's dream, that they retire and the market has the next 10 years of the best that they've ever been. Well, that's possible, but the odds aren't for you. That's why I like going with the median, the 50th percentile or below. Let's just take consideration what could happen. And if things work out better, great. What are you going to do different in 10 years when you're 70 years old and your spouse is 68 years old and your $700,000 retirement portfolio is now worth almost $3 million? You might change what you're doing. You might change a lot of what you're doing because it has done so well. So you recalculate, you reconfigure, how am I going to approach this? And you've probably done that long before 10 years. You've watched it the first few years to see how it has fared. So this is all Monte Carlo does, is it gives you some examples of how you'll end up. You can see that out of the 10,000 cases, almost just under 2,000 of them had between $0 and $5 million. So you can see here the amount of money that they end up with at the end of the 30 years. And there's some very large numbers going on here. Now, this is the extreme, which is very highly unlikely, the 1 in the 10,000th chance. So we want to look at more down this end. This is where it's most likely going to end up. So this gives you a good example, something to monitor. It is not a cut and dry. This is exactly how you're going to do it. Now, I know people ask on these videos, what about taxes? You have the dividends, which are taxed at a much lower rate. You have your standard deduction. Then you have your capital gains taxes. But if you're withdrawing from a Roth and then taking medical expenses from an HSA, there is a lot of ways to reduce your tax burden extremely low. And in this scenario, they've done it down to where their taxes on $65,000 income would be approximately $3,600 a year. This is where you would need to consult a tax professional and make sure you're capitalizing your strategy for tax withdrawal. $700,000 needing $65,000 a year at 60 and 58. Can they do it? Yes, I believe they can, as long as they're wise and they use strategies and they're willing to be flexible. Hit that like and subscribe button. Give me a comment on what you think. What should this couple do differently? If it was you, what would you do the same or differently? Leave us a comment and we'll see you next time on Simply Money.